Make it as quick as possible. If I'm talking way too technically, do let me know, because I do get a tendency to do that. Basically, I got involved with the FreeWPC project because spent out. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, basically, I used to spend hours and hours playing pinball and just trying to figure out how the pinball machine knew that I just hit a certain shot. And it seems deceptively simple logic, but as I found out, it's not actually that easy. So yeah, have you ever looked at a pinball machine and wondered how it works? I have, definitely. What is FreeWPC? It's an open source programming environment to develop custom software for WPC machines. I mean, basically what it is, it's a toolkit that you can use to generate code that you can run in your pinball table. It was created. Well, I mean, he's been working. He's had the idea for about 10 years now, 10, 15 years, and you know, looking at another person as well. Sorry, there we go. Yeah, so he's basically. I just leave on the map. No worries. Yeah, so basically he, spent the early 90s staring at pinball tables like me, trying to figure out how they worked. But he has the distinct advantage of him being really, really, really clever.
Sorry.
Yeah, so he lives in Florida. His name's Brian. He's an embedded software engineer as a profession, which obviously helps when it comes to writing stuff for pinball tables. I'm not sure if this is still correct. I think he's actually gone up a little bit. Surprisingly, him being quite a good, I'm assuming that's quite a good ranking. Am I right? There's obviously people who've got better than 152 in here then. But yeah, basically the table he's got at home is a World Cup Soccer, which I thought was a bit weird. Because I thought if you're that good at pinball, you'd probably want, Twilight Zone or Corvette or, something nice. But no, Brian rates his World Cup Soccer, and that's what the original software was done. And he started it about, officially it was about 8 years ago, basically. Skip the page then. There we go, this is this page. Yeah, it started in 2005 was the official start date. He originally did it on an assembler. If you don't know, that's a very, very low level way of talking to the hardware. And it's really quick, and you don't use many resources, but it's a real head mess to do it properly. Just to reiterate, Brian's a really clever guy. So he went off and patched the new C compiler for the processor that's in the WPC machines. Now, that's quite good as well, because the processor you get in the WPC machines is quite a world away from what you'd actually normally run generate GCC code for. So that's quite impressive. So once he patched this compiler to support the CPU, he then went through and rewrote all in C. C is it's still quite a low level language, but it's much easier to debug and work with. And for people like me, I could just about do assembler on my BBCB, because you could do basic and then drop into assembler, but I wouldn't be able to have done it unless he ported it to C. And he first fitted it to his World Cup Soccer in about 2008. But he'd been using emulators to test it with. I'll cover that in a minute. How is it different from other projects? If you're in the know, Apple and Pinball 2000. Apple is what Williams and Bally used, the operating system they used from about, I think, what was the first WPC machine? Dr. Dude? No historians in it. Yeah, Dr. Dude, I think it was, and it went all the way through to Cactus Canyon, was the last Apple, I think. And then they switched to Pinball. Pinball 2000, they wrote in under a year, which is barely good going. But that's, as I say, the thing is we can't actually use that because whoever owns the copyright for it isn't going to give it to people like me and Don or Brian. So at the moment, there's no, you can't use it basically. PBOS I found on the web. It's some guy running some System 11 gear with some custom CPU he's put in. Couldn't really find out much documentation about it. P-Rocks is the one that everyone's probably heard about. This is the one that runs the Bride of Pinball conversion you've probably seen the video of. And they've also done a demo man conversion. My main gripe for this is you need an interface board that costs about $400, and then you need to put a PC inside the cabinet, which for me, I mean, it says it all there already. You can put it, with FreeWPC, you can put it in your cabinet in under 2 minutes, and you don't need 300 quid's worth of board, you just need a chip. And if you want to reverse it, you just take the chip out and put the old chip in. Oh, no worries. I mean, as I said, there's no other hardware modifications. You don't have to add any wires or anything like that. You literally just pull a chip out and put the new one in. What does open source mean? It basically means that anyone can download and modify the entire code base freely. The only thing you're limited by is if, say, if I downloaded FreeWPC, wrote my own ROM, and then tried selling it, that would be against the law because not all of that work is mine. Part of the GPL protects you. The way the license is written, the way it works, it actually protects you. People can reuse your work, but they can't actually sell it. Now, BT were caught out by this because a lot of their home hubs, in fact, all of their home hubs use a program called New BusyBox, which is covered by the GPL. And if you make any modifications to a new GPL program, you then need to make the modifications available to others, which BT didn't do. But the point is, if you write for FreeWPC, your work's protected. It's not like, you know, someone's going to go off and sell it as a modified ROM or something. Everyone's used open source software at one point in their lives, whether they know it or not. The big examples are Mozilla, the Apache web server, and GNU Linux, which a few people might have used. Android is another good one. That's a lot of that's open source now. So just to give you an example, open source doesn't necessarily mean cheap or nasty. There are, you know, proper projects using it now. What hardware can we use at the moment? In order of sort of stability, Brian's World Cup soccer build isn't that pretty, but is absolutely rock solid. I've got my Twilight Zone build, and Dom's got his Corvette build. The Attack from Mars, Terminator 2 and Funhouse, they're very bare bones, so they've not actually been tested on hardware, and you can get them to boot and throw a ball around, but that's about it. I know Brian has now started working on a Bride of Pinball, which I'm very happy about because I quite like the table, but I really hate the rule set. So I'm hoping Brian's going to do some good with that. Theoretically, anything that's on a WPC table, we can support. Either all the way through from the earliest Doctor Who, which is Alpha, all the way to Cactus Canyon. And we can also run on other stuff as well. Because it's quite a modular system, because it's written in C, we can port it to another platform quite easily. So there is actually support in there for the Sega White Star boards, which is, remind me, what's White Star? Baywatch? Is that White Star?
Apollo 13.
Apollo 13, yeah. So there's preliminary code to run on White Star. There's also native mode, which is basically just runs on a PC, and then you can build your own interface board if you wanted. But at the moment, the main focus of development is actually just having it on the WPC hardware. Yeah, this is what you get. This is what's inside of a WPC. It's a 2 megahertz. It's an 8-bit CPU with 16-bit features, so it's not really 16-bit. Just to give you an idea of, if these numbers don't make any sense to you, 2 megahertz, right, your phone in your pocket probably runs at about 600 megahertz. Your PC runs at 1.2 gigahertz. That's 1,200 megahertz. We've got 2, so we don't have much to work with. 8K of RAM. You know the ZX Spectrum? You know how much RAM that had? 16K. Yeah, we haven't got as much RAM as the Spectrum. But the good news is, a lot of the memory can be taken up by the graphics you're displaying on the screen. And to do that, you hold it in a buffer. But fortunately, there are 16 DMD buffers in the hardware. So we've actually, because as I say, we're not devoting all our memory to be running graphics. We've actually got space for that. And we've got up to 1 megabyte storage. In terms of modern day stuff, floppy disks. Do you remember? Anyone remember a floppy disk? Yeah, it's slightly less than a floppy disk. But at the end of the day, here we go. Why not use PC hardware? Well, this is very much a subjective thing. Okay, this is my opinion, not fact. But I think video is pointless on a pinball table because you're looking at the playfield. I mean, it's nice to have, but it's not you don't need it basically. It costs time and money to design and produce an interface board, which other people have to then factor in. You'll need sub-millisecond timing, which you won't be able to get from modern OS because they're just too complicated. I mean, you don't need to be able to run Flash video to make a flipper work. So, as I say, in my view, modern OS are way too complicated for what you need to do. The other reason is dust, vibration, high voltage in the bottom of a cabinet. PCs don't like dust, they don't like vibration, they don't like high voltages. So unless you're speccing out a nice, you know, the Pinball 2000 computers, big chunky bits of hardware that ain't going to break. And as I said before, Pinball's not that complicated. It doesn't actually need 1.2 gigahertz of power. As countless people have proven, you can use 2 megahertz and 8K and it still becomes a fun game. This is the, you know, and just to I say it's not complicated, but actually you've got quite a lot that goes into it, more than you'd actually think to start with. You've got pricing, lamp effects, text rendering, device handling, so you've got to make sure your devices know where the ball is and whether the ball's exiting, and it's got to report back. I mean, this follows into ball tracking and shot maps as well. You've got time modes, audit. As I say, everything you'd ever expect from a pinball table is already written for you in a library. So you're not going to have to write a load of code to do an animation. You just say, well, use the animation code. You know, same with the time mode. If I want to do a time mode, I don't write out a whole thing. I just say, right, this will run for 20 seconds. If I want to add time, I add time here. So as I say, Brian's made it really, really easy for you to, you know, just basically use the standard pinball modes. How do we know where the ball is? Well, you don't, basically. A pinball machine can only ever guess. It can never know where a ball is, and this is because you have stuff like switch failures. Optos will they'll flash up occasionally and stuff like that. So what you do is single ball play is easy. Well, easier, because you can use stuff like timers. So the simplest way to say it is, say if I've got a loop, and you're going in from the left to the right. What you do is you start a timer when it passes this one. Say you've got a 2-second timer. And if it reaches this one within 2 seconds, you can say, oh, okay, timer, it's done a loop. And if it went up and that timer ran out and this triggered, or the timer was still running with this triggered, you know it's gone in the same way and come out the other way. And it works the other way around as well. If the ball came through here, trick starts this timer, comes around to here, this goes, oh, okay, that timer started 3 seconds ago, ergo it's come from that way. Now this is fine until you realise that things like Twilight Zone has the slot exit has a total of, I think it's 6 different entries to it. So it's got 1 exit and 6 different entries. So you've basically got to set up a whole series of timers that won't interfere with each other to know when the ball comes to this particular station. You know, say, oh, it triggers the slot timer, triggers the piano timer, comes in, lands in the slot, piano timer's running, therefore it came from the piano. As I say, that's single ball play. When you start getting into multi-ball play, really hard. Basically, you just throw it all out the window and just sort of hope that the ball is where it is. And the other thing with the ball tracking is every mechanism requires a different approach. You know, in basic terms, it's timing, because the space between the switches will be different. The actual physical design of the mechanism will be different. So even though you can copy and paste code between different machines, you might find that you'll need to tweak it a little bit just so it fits that particular machine. Right, when you start working on FreeWPC, one of the things the first thing you'll do is write a machine definition. Now what this does is it tells the build system what machine you've got, what sort of hardware it's got, and this basically allows you to just not spend ages writing lamp effects and all this other stuff. Basically, I'll run through it quickly. You've got your lamp section here. You've got a list of all the wires, so 11, 12, 13, 14, and this corresponds to the coil outputs. You just grab the manual, look at the coil outputs, lamp outputs. You see it's labelled up as panel camera HH. What's HH? Hitchhiker. There we go. We've also got colour here, so we can say to the machine, right, I want all the red lights to come on. So as I say, it just makes it easier for you. And what we've also got here is the XY coordinates of where the actual lamp is, and you work these out yourself. You just put a little transparent grid over the lamp picture, you get the manuals, and then you can work out, you know, 28 across, 30 up. And what this allows you to do is, rather than when you're generating your fancy light effects that sweep across and up and down, you just say go from this point to that point and light with the bulbs in between. And this uses these numbers to calculate out for you. So it makes, as I say, the point is, it makes it a lot easier for you. And the other thing you can do is you need lamp lists. So say if I wanted to flash all the door locks, I list them as door lock, door 1, 2, and then I just go flash door locks. The same with the door locks and gumball. I can pair up a lamp list with another lamp list. So as I say, the idea is it's to make it easier for yourself. And following on from that, we've got switches. The difference with the switches is we'll have stuff like in-game, start button, no play, no score. Now what these do is these basically say, if it's not in-game, if it's not a live game, don't do anything about it. Some buttons are always going to be on the cabinet. So the start button, for example, we can specify that as a start button, and we don't have to write the start button code because it's already in there. Same with the tilt here as well, same with the out hole. Things like the trough as well, we put no score on, just to make sure that we don't award points for a switch that's like an out hole switch. And we can also assign a little sound to it as well. I mean, you can make it more complicated, but if you just want something to make a noise when it passes over, you can just put it in there quite quickly. Same with the solenoid drives. So you'll be getting the hang of this now, look. We just have the duty cycle just basically means the amount of power you're going to apply to it. So we have like as I say, these will line up with the manual. So drive 1, drive 2, drive 3. And then you'll see here that at 100, that's 100% duty, so that's quite hard. And then we've got the time for how long it's on for here. And you'd be amazed, you don't actually power the coils on for very long at all. You can look at the knocker. In fact, what did you set your knocker to in the end, Dom?
About that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really need to give it that much juice at all. And a lot of this does vary from table to table, because even though the actual coils will be the same make and model, because the mechanism is slightly different or slightly worn, it will need slightly more power and power in a slightly different way. So some will need full power for a very short length or for a long length of time, that one is. You'll see others where it needs less power, 50%, for a long time. And so it's just because of the way the different mechanisms work. And one of the problems I've run into, and this is why I need playtesters now, is that there'll be variants in the cabinets. Some cabinets will have mechanisms that will work on 50% duty cycle, and other cabinets will have mechanisms that will work better at 75. So my job is now is to try and work out that nice middle ground where this code will work on every single type of mechanism. Templates, this is just very similar. Save a set of time. I don't want to write out how a sling works every single time. I just put in which sling it is, use the sling driver, which switch it uses, and which solenoid it uses, and that will take care of all the other parameters for me. Same with the jets, so I tell it which switch on the jet and which solenoid it drives. With the clock, there's a couple of other drivers as well. There's one for the clock, which is just a bivariable backwards and forwards one. You can get more complicated drivers, but at the moment I think, as I say, it's just to save yourself time. Right, why not use factory software? This is my favourite bit. Well, it's because we're not focused on ball times or coin drop. We're not trying to get money out of people, right? My ethos is I'm developing it for the home market, so I may as well put features in home users want. And we're not restricted by market trends. I don't have to make a Tron machine. I don't have to make, what's the other one? Transformers. I don't have to make a Transformers machine or a Lord of the Rings. I can make whatever machine I want. If I want myself to swear at people, I can do that if I want. The other benefit, with the factory software as well, everyone's bored of it. It's been out for 15, 20 years in some cases. So everyone knows exactly how it works and knows how to cane all the big scores on it. So you're going to get new challenges. You can totally change the game if you want, turn it into a time game like Safecracker. And also, this is the reason why I wanted to get bot done. You can do score balancing. You can get rid of that stupid billion shot. So the trouble is, right, on bot, the nearest closest shot to it's 50 million, right? Do you know how many 50 millions there are in a billion? It makes absolutely no sense to shoot for anything but the billion, really. But as I say, you can find out the quirks on the table that people tend to, take advantage of and just get rid of them. And it's easily and quickly customizable. You couldn't, I had to add an advert in for the UK Pinball Party. It took me about 10 minutes, 20 minutes for testing. It's not that hard to do at all. You can also use features of the cabinet, so you can have it pop up on birthdays. I think some of the official software does this anyway, and that uses the real-time clock that's present in the hardware. You can have unique features per cabinet. So say you've got two, or the original use of it was basically some of the WPC stuff, like the later edition stuff, actually has a serial number put into the CPU board. So say I want to give a copy of my software to John, and John's got this particular serial number table. I can make sure that I can give him this software, and he can't use that software at any other table. I can make sure that he's the only one who can test it. And this is very important because it is beta software, and we'd all be absolutely mortified if someone managed to break their table with it. Personally, the worst I've done is blown a fuse in the 3 years I've been working on it, but we all understand how much people love their pinball tables. So as I say, we can, if we wanted, we could have features where we could lock it down to particular tables. I mean, it doesn't have to be nasty. We could have it say, like, if you gave it to a particular table, it has a different rule set for them or a special message. And the other thing is just unique tournament settings. So you could have, I don't know, off the top of my head, one-handed tournament. So the machine detects if you're trying to press 2 buttons at the same time. Or reverse flippers, so the flippers flip around the other way. Or, you know, as I say, you can set the rules exactly how you want. You're not limited by some guy in a suit. You're not limited by Gary Stern. You can do whatever you want. This is the sort of stuff I've put into FreeWPC on my Twilight Zone. Phil Dixon, helpfully, I'll put a post out on the mailing list, and Phil Dixon came up with a very good idea, which is the anti-cradle. Basically what this is, if you're playing multi-ball and you start cradling the ball, it will only cradle it for 5 seconds, and after 2 seconds, it'll start giving you a warning, telling you that you're cradling, and then it will just drop the flippers. They'll come back on again, but as I say, it's to stop people cradling the ball. You get 5 seconds, which I feel is, you know, it's fair, it's fair. And as I say, it stops people sitting there with 5 balls in one and just playing with the other. The alarm timer, I find this really helpful. It's you know, you just put it into pause, hit the flipper button to 10 minutes, wicked. My pizza's no longer burnt, my cup of tea's no longer overstewed. So as I say, you'll be playing a game and it will just start flashing at you, saying at your time, oh, missed the bus, or I've got a phone call to make, or whatever. The button masher, I've had so much fun with that one. Honestly, on the mini playfield on Twilight Zone, I have a friend of mine who refuses to play it properly and just smashes the buttons every time it goes to the mini playfield without using any skill whatsoever. So to combat this, I've made it basically turn off the magnets if it detects, I think it's 10 button pushes in 4 seconds or something. And also, I've been watching people play it, and it's been making me laugh quite a lot. The lucky bouncers and the unfair death, one of the benefits we have writing software is we can taunt the player like they used to do in pinball. Like Black Knight's a great machine for being taunt. Yeah, the machine taunts you. Like, come on, beat me. It's like, okay. And so they don't really do it anymore. So you've got like the unfair death. So say on TZ, the ball flies into the jets, and all of a sudden it bangs it down one of the out lanes. If it basically goes from a jet to an out lane in under a second, I count as an unfair death. And it's the same with lucky bounces. If the ball bounces from the sling, if it does the sling to the slot in less than a second, that's counted as a lucky bounce. And there is an award for the luckiest git I put in. TZ doesn't have a skill shot, or super skill, it has a skill shot, but one of the things about the TZ skill shot is because of the way the machine's designed, there's only one way it can work anyway, regardless of the rules. So what I've done is I've put in a super duper skill shot, which is basically, as I say, you can just add more depth to the table or add features that weren't present in the original software. And I've also got a magnet throw, which works, sort of, but I need to work on it a little bit more. I mean, I spoke to Ted Estes about it, and he said they actually written it for the original 9.4 software. They actually had a ball, what a magnet throw is, basically you have a magnet, the ball travels up, 100% power holds it, then it turns off the magnet, waits for the ball to drop, and then a little while later it turns the magnet on for a very short period of time. So it sucks the ball up, and because the magnet's not on by the time this gets here, throws it up like that. And basically, Ted Estes had written this for his table, and got it working, took it over to Larry's table, so they both got a table each to develop on, and it wouldn't work on his. And the reason is because on Twilight Zone, say that's your magnet, where the magnet and the octo is to sense where the ball is on top of the magnet isn't lined up the same on each table. So although you can get it working, it is a case of you're going to have to tweak it for each table. So as I said, there are some things that just out of reach, unfortunately, due to hardware design. The multiplayer options I've put in, display the highest single ball score, which I think is cool, because you get people say, oh well, you know, I had a really good score that ball, and it's like, you don't know, do you? Well, at the moment, I think it will show at the end of the multiplayer game who had the highest single ball score. I've noticed that a few people came up to me and said this was good. How many points you've got to win? When you want your third ball, if you're on if it's the last player if it's the last player and the last ball, then it tells you how many points you've got to win. Otherwise, you can go to the status menu and you can step through and it will tell you, say you've got 180 points to go or whatever. But what it also does as well is whilst you're playing it, it will tell you when you've taken the lead, which for me is great because it means I can stop playing. You know, you don't get 20 minutes passing, have I beaten you yet? So, oh, okay. Lowest goes next. Right, I'm sure everyone will appreciate this. Basically, what happens in my house when people come around to play pinball is, wicked, I'll be player 1, you be player 2. Player 1 has a go, 20 minutes later it's player 2's go. Player 2 has a go for 2 minutes, dies. Player 1 steps up, plays again for another 20 minutes. Player 2 gets a bit bored of this because he's waiting 20 minutes for a 2-minute game. So what I've done is basically it's as simple as after ball 1, the person with the lowest ball goes next. So what invariably happens is you go out, smash a massive ball out, get 200 million, and you can go out and sit there and have a cigarette and wait for your mates to catch up, because as I say, you'll still be on ball 1 and they'll go through to ball 2, ball 3 until their score is higher than yours. And so it just stops the whole, well, I would like to play pinball with you, but it sucks because I have to wait ages. And so it does work. I've put 6-player support in. It does work, but it's a little bit buggy at the moment. And this is the thing I'm really interested in, is the persistent player data and auto handicapping, which is basically, like a Xbox gamer tag. You log in, you have certain challenges you have to complete. You don't have to do them necessarily that game. So you can get like a little gamer tag score and stuff like that. I mean, at the moment it's not looking too likely because, like I said, we haven't actually got that much storage. But I think it's maybe possible. What we can't do is there's no custom sounds or music at the moment. This is because what we're changing is the CPU. On the soundboard, it's actually a completely separate computer. It has its own CPU, it has its own RAM, and it's basically communicated by just a little sort of serial-like link that say, the CPU will say, play this music, and this computer will then play the music. Brian has written an operating system for it, but because he's not a synth guy, he's more of an embedded system guy. He doesn't really know how to use a synth chip, and he's got much better things to be doing with his time. So at the moment we're limited to the sounds and music that are already in the machine. The other thing we can't do, it's not a ROM hack, or basically the code that's in FreeWPC from the ground up is our own code. None of it is Williams code or Valley code or whatever you care to think of.